All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning back into another Kill Rationalism video. Now, I had so much fun in the last video going over my favorite anti-rationalist stances that I thought I really wanted to dig into poetry more deeply and sort of creativity and what Gebser has to say about it. So hopefully this video, if my last one didn't work, this one will truly inspire you to really appreciate poetry and what it is. Don't worry, I'm still going to be doing sort of philosophical, intellectual takedowns. I think I'm going to do the is-ought gap as the next video in this series. But I just liked talking about poetry, and I got to a part in my book about it, so I thought I would share it with you guys. Now, of course, I will be, as always, pulling from Jean Gebser's The Ever-Present Origin. I'm doing a series on it. If you haven't watched that, please. We have a great time. It's a lot of fun. And without further ado, I don't want to make this too long, so let's get right into it. So let's talk about creativity, and let's talk about the rational understanding and the rational way of being creative. So creativity is a product of rational egoic thought. It is when we willfully make connections and associations between established images, ideas, or works of art. Creativity is generated by the self, the strong subject, the psychological I that can direct its thoughts. Now, there's a lot of good stuff here. Robert Greene talks about this, and obviously he's no Gebser, but I think he has something worthwhile to say. And he talks about how creativity is about connections. Now, when I work on creative projects, that's what I do. I make connections between things. So we'll get to creative epiphany later. We'll get there, but if you really want to get things done, what you do is you put in as much as you can in your head, and then you start making connections, right? So what if, the story from Lord of the Rings ended this way? Or what if this philosophy that I read about in a book was put into this character and he was a villain? How would he interpret it? Stuff like that. There's a lot of good stuff with this approach. It's nowhere near true creativity. It's nowhere near that, but it's helped me a lot, and that's the only really way I know so far. And of course, I'm going to try to um, uh, create or have authentic creativity happen to me, but we'll get there. Um, so that's the rational understanding. It's of the self. It's willful. It's about making connections. It's done in this sort of conscious awakeness, this ego. We're good. We're in the clear clarity of thought here. Okay. So before we talk about anything more, we need to talk about soul versus origin. Now, origin, we haven't really gotten to integral consciousness yet in my series, but we'll get there. So we'll kind of get into these. Now, origin, to be clear, I'm going to make it very clear what origin is, but origin is not a word to signify the beginning of something. Origin transcends time, and beginning is temporal, right? It's a matter of time. Origin transcends that. So it's not that. It's a very specific use of that word. So let's start out. So both soul and origin are very similar, but they are subtly different. They are similar in that they are both quantifiably immeasurable. They're both quantifiably immeasurable. They're both energies, forces, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so origin is the spiritual ground or floor, if you'll excuse my spatial rationalization there, underlying and embedded in all experiences and phenomena. It is spiritual energy that permeates man and the world, the invisible, immeasurable spiritual ground out of which conscious structures mutate. So it is exactly that, spiritual energy or forces that permeates all phenomena in the world and is embedded in all phenomena in the world. It is quantifiably immeasurable. It is invisible to the naked eye. You simply cannot see it. It is timeless. It is non-causal. So it is above the rational mental consciousness structure. Okay, it's above rationality. It is above logic. It expresses itself through myth, creativity, and art. It transcends the strong subject or ego. It operates when the ego recedes and becomes transparent. So that's a big part of it. And then it's only accessible to those who have attained the integral consciousness. So your mental, rational spatialization has got to go. Okay, we got to drop that. That's hopefully what I'm trying to do with this series. So that's origin, the spiritual ground constituted of energy, forces, whatever you want to call it, that permeates and is embedded in all phenomena in this world, literally all phenomena, discovered or undiscovered. So there is a spiritual dimension in literally, and you guys know me, I don't use that word lightly. everything in this world, including you. So that's cool. So that's origin. Let's talk about soul. Soul is the locus of individual interiority that emerges within the mental structure. Now, it's interesting that's the mental structure in which the soul emerges, because you think, well, mental would be rational, and rational is quantifiably measurable, consciously known. The soul is quantifiably immeasurable, as we said. So it seems weird. It seems at odds, and I thought that at first, but it's really not. It makes sense. And the reason it makes sense is because you have to remember that the mental consciousness structure birthed the strong subject, the strong I, whether it be psychological I, so just me and what I like. I live at a certain place, I go to work at a certain place, yeah. Or the philosophical I, the ability to perceive and to be aware you're perceiving. Great. But one cannot even recognize or ponder the soul if there is not even a preceding I. If you have no I, that's just like the floor ground. The soul is beneath that, right? So you can't really do that if if there's not even an I. If you're looking into your soul, that presupposes you have a sense of I. And that sense of I only came about in the ancient Greeks, really, and the Renaissance, the birth of the mental conscious structure proper. Um, so the soul mediates between ego and world. So it's separate from ego, of course. It is the seat of personal life, emotion, memory, and moral values. It operates through/with the ego and is accessible through psychological or spiritual practices, not necessarily integral structure. So the fact that we can see the self, as I just laid it out, and the fact that I can render transparent the ego, that signals to me that I am not the psyche or the ego. There is a deeper interiority beneath the ego and the psyche. That, my friend, is where the soul lives. It is the entirety of the interior nature of the human. Quantifiably immeasurable, of course. It is always in the sort of movement between the life pole and the death pole, the yin and the yang there. That's how the soul operates. So that's the difference between origin and soul. Both quantifiably immeasurable spiritual energies, but one is more individual focused, more, I guess, personal. Remember, it assigns meaning to personal life, emotion, memory, and moral values and all that stuff. Whereas the soul can be understood through the I, spiritual practice, psychological practice. Origin can only be understood through a transcendence to integral consciousness. So origin is almost seeming to be a little more powerful than soul, even though they're both incredibly powerful energies, forces, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so we talked about rational creativity, and that was my understanding of creativity until about 2 days ago. So let's talk about real or authentic creativity. I think you could probably see where this is going. So authentic creativity, according to Sean Gebser, is not something we willfully do, but something that happens to us. This is very important. The rational mode of creativity is exactly that. It is willful. It is something we do. I have a conscious, yes, I am picking up my mouse, I am dropping it, okay? Rather than I am going to jump into the pool to get wet. Or I can stand still and the water from the pool can magically arise and just sort of soak over me, right? It's happened to me rather than me doing it. Let's see. It is timeless. True creativity arises when the consciousness of the poet is sufficiently open to allow the powers of the soul and origin to stream through. Origin is present within authentic, timeless creativity. If I remember, I'll try to there's a point. Timeless is very important. What was the preceding discovery that birthed the integral consciousness structure? So that's authentic creativity. Authentic creativity arises when the consciousness of the artist or poet is sufficiently open so that the forces of either the soul or origin can stream through and do their magic. And I'll break down specifically how that works. But first we have to talk about the muses. So the muse is a staple of not only poetry but art. But the muse is merely an imagistic symbol, and Joseph Campbell reminds us in his masterpiece, I can't reach it, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, never to conflate symbol with symbolize. So the muse is usually a woman, put to image or myth, and this woman or goddess acts as artistic inspiration, creative inspiration to the artist. Great. You still see this nowadays, by the way. Um, and think about, I didn't write this down, but muse, I remember the etymological root was musa, M-O-U-S-A, I think, and that was to ponder. So of course, when you're musing, you're kind of pondering, right, in an artistic, creative way. Very interesting. But the muse is usually a woman, and it usually feeds artistic creativity. The muse sings to the poet, um, who is then inspired and compelled to create. Every poet can render beautifully what the muse has compelled them to say. So a muse is that um, artistic inspiration. But remember, don't conflate symbol with symbolized. So we talked about the symbol of muse. Let's get into symbolized. So the muse is a few things. The muse is recollection. That is the internalization of an event or a disposition of things, or the process or ability of becoming intimately aware of them. The muse is memory, the ability of thoughts and thinking. The muses are an image of the sustenance of the life soul. That's big. The muse is, in essence, the muse is, in essence, the source, perpetual abundance, and the sustainer of the soul. It is the receptress and recollectress, of creativity who awakens in the poet this recollection. So the muse, remember, that's the symbol. If the muse is the soul, the source, perpetual abundance, and sustainer of the soul, and the soul is what? These quantifiably immeasurable energies of forces of the life pole and the death pole that sort of make up your internal state. Cool. So here's how poetry works specifically. When the muse is invoked, the symbol muse, the poet is really invoking those quantifiably immeasurable forces and energies that constitute the soul. So if you want to think of it spatially, just think of it just like whatever. Think of it like a house, and then think of the wood it took to make it, and then take that and then make it invisible. It's the exact same concept, just invisible. So the when the muse is merely a symbol for the soul, the creative aspects of the soul, at least. So the poet is drawing up from the well of the soul, it could be life or death pole, and as long as his consciousness is sufficiently open to receive it, that is to say, not rationalist, the soul inspires an artistic epiphany in which all that has ever been brought about is recollected and channeled back into the life soul until he is compelled to put to word and image what has been seen. So the poet needs artistic inspiration. He calls upon the muses. He invokes the muses. What is the muse? A symbol for a certain aspect of the soul, the creative aspect. So what he does is he reflects inward, the soul bubbles up, he opens his consciousness, and those forces and energies that are quantifiably measurable that constitute the soul, that act as what the soul is quote unquote made of, they spring up like a well, like water from a spring, and they arise into the consciousness of the poet. And what does it say? All and then an epiphany is made in which all that has ever been brought about is recollected and channeled back into the life soul. So the forces come up, they inspire an artistic epiphany where we can make creative connections, almost just like that. And then these powers are channeled back into the life soul, and then it just keeps streaming, keeps creating until the poet is compelled. He is seized. He must put to image and word what has been seen. It's very interesting. So the muse is that invisible facilitator of this process. So the muse is the guy on the factory line just being like, yep, let's go. Let's put him into the chute. Let's go. Of course, when I say that, that's a quantifiably measurable thing, right? So don't get too lost on that. I'm just trying to make it a little more clear. But it's all invisible, all immeasurable. Very important. So that's kind of what's happening. Same thing with the death pole. Think of T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. That was not the life pole of the soul that brought you that, my friend. That was the wasteland. That was the death pole of the soul. So poetry is so powerful because the soul is so powerful. Because the creativity inspired by soul or origin is not a product of willful, rational connections, but a revelation of origin in all its spiritual profundity. That's another thing. So when the soul brings in all those powers, that's huge, that's big. It is revealing what has been unseen before, what has been what one has not attained yet. We are not necessarily creating, we are revealing the soul. And of course, this applies to origin as well. So not only those energies that constitute your internal locus, but the entire world, origin, also can compound this process. So when you do it with the soul, that's great. But when you do it with origin, that's timeless art. That's Holderlin. That's Holderlin. That's timeless art. Um, that is what Gebser means when he says creativity is origin is present within creativity. Creativity is something that happens to you. True creativity, something that happens to you, and the happening, the cause of this happening, is origin. So very interesting. So the word again, but a revelation of origin in all its profundity. So not only do you have the powers of the soul, these can be compounded by an even more powerful source, that of origin. So poetry transcends the ineffable, which oppresses rational thought and is stated in turn in poetry. So poetry states the ineffable. What cannot be said is said in poetry. And the ineffable, what cannot be understood mentally, by definition, oppresses rational thought. It just destroys you. The rationalists don't understand this. They cannot ever know the whole, whatever. And the universal truths of the soul or of origin of the world speak to its profundity. That's why people love it so much, because it hits a truth that, though quantifiably immeasurable, is more powerful because it is quantifiably immeasurable. It is above all your contingent circumstances. No one cares. It is a mental understanding of the non-mental aspects of the soul. In addition to that, it's beautiful and soul-touching. So let's talk about poetry as history. So history, of course, if you followed my Gebser series, is defined as attributing sense to the senseless. I know it sounds weird, but it respects both sense, as opposed to the rationalist way of only exclusively valuing sense over senseless. It respects both sense and senseless, which is to say, we are doing our best, and we know that there is stuff out there that is just beyond our grasp at present moment. So history, as defined as the attribution of sense to the senseless, and then the internal recollection and proceeding externalization found in the pattern of historical recording is also very similar to that of the poets. That's what they do. They internally recollect and then externalize. Of course, they do it a little differently. So poetry is history, not of the dates, but the dateless, not of events, but of events effected by creativity. It is a history of the soul and of the world effected by origin. So we get the world, great, that's nice. I get my little mouse pad. This is not the mouse pad that is inspired by, or when I say the powers of soul and origin, when they stream up, this no longer becomes a simple mouse pad. This becomes a mouse pad effected by creativity, authentic, real creativity. And in this mouse pad, I can ascertain timeless truths of the world. That is the power of origin, soul, and poetry, and killing rationals. So very beautiful. So last point, the beauty of poetry. Take lyric poetry. Lyric poetry is the mental, rational understanding of poetry. I think it's generally pretty great. There's a lot of good stuff. But it's because it's rational, there's a strong subject, a strong sense of I. So this kind of poetry is more individually focused, and because it is, when one is feeling a particular way, they can lean upon it to either aid them or compound their already good feeling. So when you're suffocated by the death pull of the soul, when you're in the deep depths of depression, I've been there. When you have a family die, or a family member die, unfortunately, or something terrible happens, you get cancer, you lose all your money. The death pull of the soul has got you. It's choking you out. You can lean on poetry when you've hit rock bottom to help you out. You will find in poems exactly that which threatens to overcome you. And the poets give sorrow expression and form so that it can be mastered. The poets take these emotions, these powerful aspects of us, give them expression and form and beauty, and aid us in our struggle of life. So that hopefully inspired you to have a little bit of a different understanding of poetry. Hopefully it inspired you to maybe see it a little differently. Maybe you did view it that way already, and maybe I'm just a little behind the curve on this one. So I really appreciate you guys so much. Again, look out for more, a little more. I'm not saying this was like dumb or anything. We got into some pretty abstract stuff, but I think I'll take a more intellectual, philosophical take for my next Kill Rationalism video, because it's important to, you want to do fun and creative ones, but you don't only want to do those ones as well. So I love you guys. You guys know I love you. I hope you're thriving. And let me know what you guys think, who your favorite poets are, what your favorite stanzas are. Get them in the comments. I would love to read them. You guys are the best. And I will see you hopefully in my Jean Gebser series video, which should come out tomorrow. Love you guys.